The hot summer air felt heavy in downtown Atlanta that afternoon. Sergeant Carl Whitman adjusted his cap, beads of sweat rolling down his forehead, his pale knuckles gripping his baton a little too tightly. He'd always seen himself as a tough enforcer, a protector of order. But deep inside, he carried a bitterness he refused to face. Near a bus stop stood a black woman, elegantly dressed in a plain black t-shirt and jeans. Her name was Naomi Jefferson. Today, she had chosen to wear civilian clothes to visit her mother before an upcoming police leadership summit. Her calm eyes scanned the street as she hummed softly to herself, a melody her late father used to sing. Carl spotted her from across the street. The moment he saw Naomi's confident posture and the gentle way she helped an elderly lady sit on a bench, a dark anger flared inside him, the kind that had been festering since childhood, whispered into his ears by a father who taught him that some people didn't belong. Naomi didn't notice him at first. She offered her water bottle to a young man who looked exhausted from the sun. Her small kindnesses were second nature. She never imagined they would become the reason she'd face the most humiliating moment of her life. Suddenly, she heard boots pounding on the sidewalk behind her. Before she could turn, a heavy fist crashed into her face. She fell to the ground, her lip splitting open. Passers-by screamed. The young man she had helped just minutes earlier rushed forward, but was shoved away. Carl stood over her, chest heaving. "Stay down! Who do you think you are, causing trouble here?" he shouted, his voice echoing with misplaced authority and old hatred. Naomi wiped blood from her lip, her eyes locked onto his. But instead of fear, there was disappointment, as though she saw beyond the uniform into the broken boy inside the man. She slowly sat up, her breathing controlled, her dignity unbroken even as blood dripped down her chin. Around them, a small crowd began to gather, some pulling out phones to record. Murmurs of, "She didn't do anything," and "That was uncalled for," rose like a tidal wave. Carl's hand hovered near his holster, his mind spiraling into panic. Naomi spoke, her voice surprisingly calm and firm. "Officer, do you know who I am?" she asked, each word a dagger of truth. Carl sneered. "I don't care who you are. People like you think you own the place." But before he could finish, a young woman in the crowd screamed, "That's Chief Jefferson, the first black female police chief in Atlanta." The words seemed to hang in the humid air. Carl's mouth fell open. His knees felt weak, his mind desperately searching for an escape from the horror of what he had just done. Naomi stood up slowly, her presence towering over him despite her smaller frame. And for the first time in his life, Carl felt the full weight of his choices. Silence wrapped the street like a heavy blanket. Carl's eyes darted to the growing crowd, now dozens deep, their faces a mixture of rage, disbelief, and disgust. Some people raised their phones higher, live streaming this moment to the world. Naomi took a step forward, her steps steady despite the pain pulsing through her face. The blood on her lip had dried slightly, but her eyes burned bright, not with revenge, but with a deep, almost spiritual sadness. She had worn that uniform proudly for over 20 years, fighting for justice, trying to change the system from within. But in this moment, she realized how far they still had to go. "Get on your knees," a voice from the crowd suddenly demanded. It wasn't Naomi's voice. It came from an older woman, tears streaming down her face. Others echoed her cry, "Kneel! Kneel for what you've done!" Carl's breathing grew ragged. His fingers trembled as he removed his cap, his gaze stuck on Naomi's eyes, the eyes of a leader, a fighter, a mother to an entire community. With every second that passed, the weight of his actions crushed him deeper. Slowly, almost involuntarily, Carl sank to his knees on the scorching pavement. His face turned red, and tears he didn't know he was capable of shedding began to flow. Naomi watched, her chest rising and falling as she held back her own tears. A reporter pushed through the crowd, microphone in hand, cameras trained on the scene. "Chief Jefferson, do you want to press charges? What do you want to say to the public?" Naomi closed her eyes for a moment. Memories flooded her mind. Her first day at the academy when she was told she would never make it past patrol. The times she was overlooked for promotions because of her skin and her gender. The countless nights she held her daughter and whispered that someday they would be seen as equal. She opened her eyes and spoke, her voice strong enough to silence the entire street. Justice isn't just a word, it's a responsibility. It starts with accountability, and it ends with change. Today, you all saw what happens when power falls into the wrong hands. But this isn't about me. This is about every black woman who has ever been silenced, every black man who has been unjustly targeted, every child who grows up wondering if they will ever be seen as human. The crowd erupted in cheers and sobs. Some people dropped their phones, overwhelmed. Naomi walked forward and stood directly in front of Carl. She looked down at him, her shadow stretching across his shaking body. She spoke quietly, so only he could hear. "You were taught to hate me before you even knew me. But I see you. I see the scared boy inside the uniform. You must answer for what you did. But I still see your humanity." Carl collapsed, sobbing into his hands. He had expected fury, but what broke him was the unexpected mercy. Naomi turned to the crowd, her hands lifted slightly, calling for calm. The entire city seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what would happen next. Naomi felt the blood on her lips start to dry and sting as she looked out at the faces in front of her. The young, the old, black, white, all standing together. A living testament to the power of unity when the truth is laid bare. A young black boy stepped forward from the crowd. Maybe 10 years old, he looked at Naomi with wide, tearful eyes. He held out a small paper badge he had made at home, a craft project that read "Future Hero" in marker. His tiny hands trembled as he offered it to her. Naomi knelt down, ignoring the pain that shot through her body. She took the paper badge gently, her fingers brushing against the boy's. "Thank you," she whispered. "This means more to me than any medal I've ever received." The boy's mother came forward, pulling him into a tight hug, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for showing him what real strength looks like," she choked out. Naomi nodded, squeezing the badge to her chest. Carl remained on his knees, now nearly frozen in place. A few fellow officers finally arrived, their sirens echoing in the distance. But when they stepped out and saw what was unfolding, they hesitated. No one moved to defend Carl. The scene had become bigger than any badge or rank. It had become a moment of collective reckoning. One officer, Officer Martinez, finally approached Naomi, his expression troubled but respectful. "Chief Jefferson, do you want us to take him into custody?" he asked quietly. Naomi stood, looking down at Carl. She took a slow breath. "Yes," she said softly but firmly. "He must face the consequences of his actions, like any citizen would." Martinez nodded and gently guided Carl to his feet, placing handcuffs on his wrists. Carl didn't resist. His head hung low, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. As they led him away, Naomi turned back to the crowd, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes on her. A woman near the front stepped forward, wiping her eyes. "We love you, Chief," she shouted. The words were quickly echoed by dozens more voices, building into a chorus that seemed to shake the air. Naomi felt her own tears finally spill over. She lifted the boy's paper badge to the sky for everyone to see. "This is our future," she cried, her voice breaking with emotion. "A future where every child knows they are valued. Where every uniform represents service, not power. And where love wins over hate." People started applauding, then clapping harder, until it became a roar of support. Naomi felt her knees weaken, but strong arms caught her. Community members helping her stand tall, holding her up both literally and spiritually. She looked up into the summer sky, her father's old song echoing in her mind, and for the first time in years, she felt an unshakable hope rising in her chest. Naomi stood there, held up by the very people she had vowed to protect, her heart pounding with a mix of pain, pride, and relief. For years she had hidden parts of herself, her vulnerability, her deep-seated fears, and her burning desire to change a system that too often broke more than it mended. But at this moment, everything she had ever tried to hide shone as clearly as the afternoon sun overhead. The media had arrived, their cameras clicking rapidly, capturing every tear, every trembling hand. Reporters pushed forward, shouting questions, but Naomi didn't care. This wasn't about headlines anymore. This was about every black mother who feared for her son every time he stepped outside, every daughter who learned too early what prejudice felt like, and every officer who joined the force to protect but ended up silenced by a toxic culture. A gentle voice pulled Naomi back. It was an older black woman with silver curls, standing close. "Baby," she said softly, pressing a trembling hand against Naomi's cheek. "You gave us our dignity back today. You showed them our power and our grace. Don't you ever forget that." Naomi's tears fell freely as she leaned into the woman's hand, a warmth she hadn't felt since her mother passed away. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for reminding me what this fight is really about." The crowd began to thin as Carl was taken away, some people shaking their heads in disbelief, others walking away in silent contemplation. But a core group stayed, standing near Naomi, as if to form a protective circle around her. Among them, Officer Martinez stepped forward again. "Chief, what will you do next?" he asked carefully, his voice full of uncertainty but also hope. Naomi straightened, her spine stiffening with purpose. "I will continue to lead," she said. "I will make sure our department becomes a place where every officer is taught compassion before combat, understanding before authority. We will change from the inside out, and anyone who refuses to grow with us will have no place here." Martinez nodded slowly, his eyes filling with tears. "I'm with you," he said, and a few other officers murmured their agreement, stepping forward to stand at Naomi's side. In that instant, Naomi felt an invisible chain snap, the weight of silence that had long stifled her and so many others finally breaking. She looked at the small group around her, at the community beyond them, and felt a surge of determination stronger than she had ever known. Later that evening, after she had her wounds treated and the crowds had gone home, Naomi sat alone in her office. She pulled out a small wooden box, one her father had given her when she graduated from the academy. Inside was his old badge and a note that simply read, "Change doesn't come from titles, it comes from courage." Naomi held the badge against her heart, closing her eyes as a deep calm settled over her. She understood now that true power wasn't in force or fear. It was in love, in community, in standing firm, even when your knees shook. She rose from her chair, looking at her reflection in the dark window, and smiled through her bruises. Tomorrow would bring more battles, more doubt, more pain. But she was ready, because today the city had seen her, not as a uniform, not as a target, but as a human being who dared to fight for something better. And somewhere deep in the night, in the quiet corners of the city, 1,000 silent prayers rose up for her, for change, for a world where no child would have to learn what hate looked like in a badge or a punch. Naomi knew the road ahead would not be easy, but tonight, for the first time in her life, she felt like she wasn't walking it alone. The next morning, the city awoke to a new story. Headlines carried photos of Naomi standing proud despite her bruises, her uniform sleeve torn, her head held high. The footage of Carl, once so proud and defiant, now being led away in handcuffs, played on every local channel. Across town, people sat at their breakfast tables, staring at their screens in stunned silence. Many wept quietly, feeling a long-buried ache come to the surface. Parents hugged their children tighter, silently praying they would grow up in a world kinder than the one they knew. In a small diner downtown, a young black boy watched the footage on his mother's phone. His eyes, wide and uncertain, finally lit up as he saw Naomi speak with strength and love. "Mama," he said softly, "she looks like me." His mother hugged him fiercely, whispering into his hair, "Yes, baby. And she's showing you that you can be strong and good all at once." Meanwhile, at police headquarters, the ripple of Naomi's actions was turning into a tidal wave. Officers who had always stayed silent began to voice their support for reform. Others, who had hidden behind the old ways, handed in their resignations rather than face the new standard Naomi was setting. The halls felt different now, the air clearer, the silence more honest. Carl, sitting in a jail cell, trembled. His mind replayed the moment Naomi revealed her badge, the way the crowd turned on him, the way his own uniform suddenly felt like chains instead of armor. For the first time in his life, he saw his reflection not as a hero, but as a coward, trapped by his own hate. Naomi visited the community center that evening, still wearing her uniform, though now washed and mended. She found herself surrounded by children who looked at her with starry eyes, teenagers who wanted to ask questions, elders who simply wanted to hold her hand. She sat down with them all, sharing her fears, her hopes, her regrets. She didn't hold back, and neither did they. One old man, whose voice was cracked but strong, squeezed her hand and said, "We needed to see someone like you stand up. You didn't just fight for you, child. You fought for all of us." Naomi's eyes shimmered, and she could only nod, too overwhelmed to find words. In that simple exchange, she felt 1,000 heavy doors open inside her heart. Later that night, as she finally returned home, Naomi stepped into her small kitchen, made herself a cup of tea, and stood by the window. The city lights twinkled below like distant stars, each one a story she hadn't yet heard, a life she hadn't yet touched. She thought of her father, of her mother's quiet strength, of every sacrifice she had made to wear that badge with honor. And for the first time in years, she allowed herself to truly exhale. Naomi took a sip, closed her eyes, and felt something profound. Not victory, not relief, but a deep, enduring peace. In that stillness, she knew she had ignited a fire that would outlive her. She had chosen love over fear, justice over comfort, and humanity over tradition. Tomorrow, she would face more challenges, more doubts, more enemies hiding behind friendly smiles. But tonight, she allowed herself to rest. Somewhere out there, a little girl might be looking at the sky, dreaming of flying, fighting, leading, because she saw Naomi. Naomi set her mug down, pressed her palm to the window, and whispered to the night, "We rise together." And somewhere deep in the city, hearts rose with her, ready to follow. Jessica's story became a beacon for others, proof that even a moment of shame could lead to a lifetime of service. She knew that her journey was far from over, but she faced each day with hope, courage, and a heart open to change. Years later, Jessica stood at the airport window, watching planes take off into the golden evening sky. She was now a senior leader at the airline, respected for her wisdom and compassion. New recruits often sought her out, eager to hear the story of the day she met Morgan Freeman and how it changed her life. She always told it honestly, never hiding her mistake, always emphasizing the lesson. Ethan, now a young man, had become a pilot. He often flew the same routes Jessica once worked as a flight attendant. On his first solo flight, he called her from the cockpit, his voice full of pride and gratitude. "I carry your story with me, Mom," he said. "I try to see every passenger the way you taught me." Jessica's heart overflowed with love and pride. One afternoon, Jessica received a letter from Morgan. He wrote about his travels, the people he'd met, and the stories he'd heard. He thanked her again for her kindness and for reminding him and the world that dignity and empathy matter more than status or appearance. "We are all connected by the burdens we carry," he wrote. "Thank you for helping me carry mine." Jessica framed the letter and hung it in her office, a daily reminder of how far she'd come. She knew that her journey had not been easy, but it had been meaningful. She had turned a moment of humiliation into a legacy of hope, teaching others that redemption is always possible. At the airline's annual gala, Jessica was honored with a Lifetime Achievement Award. As she accepted, she looked out at the crowd, her colleagues, her son, and even Morgan, who had come to surprise her. She spoke from the heart. "We all make mistakes. What matters is how we grow from them and how we treat others along the way. Every day, we have the chance to choose kindness." The audience rose in applause, many wiping away tears. Jessica felt a deep sense of peace. She knew that her story would live on, not just in awards or headlines, but in the quiet acts of compassion carried out by those she had inspired. As the night ended, Jessica and Morgan stood together beneath the stars. They spoke of journeys, of burdens, and of the power of a single moment to change everything. Jessica realized that the greatest gift she had received was not forgiveness, but the chance to help others find their own path to redemption. And so Jessica's story became a legend, not just in the airline, but in the hearts of all who heard it. It was a story of transformation, of moral justice, of the hidden struggles of everyday people. It was a reminder that we are all more than what we carry, and that the smallest act of kindness can change a life forever.